Remember when I said that AI is stupid? I said machines are stupid, right? And human beings are deranged, which means when you generate an image on whatever AI tool that you use, that image is not being generated from thin air. That image is being generated from the thousands, from the millions of images already existing within that system. So when you then use AI to produce porn, and you're like, yeah, but it's an AI character. That AI character was not pulled from thin air. So what that means, therefore, is for you to get to use ChatGPT, it comes not just as a neutral tool. This system actually is built on a mountain of trauma of these human beings, because imagine someone spending 9 hours sifting through this terrible, terrible content.
When we talk about digital divides, I worry that the gap between people using it as an answer engine versus using it to help provide you with better thinking, that's going to be the problem.
We need to understand always what the funding model is and what is the political system behind any tool that our kids are using.
AI is not some machine god somewhere up in the sky. It's a physical building on someone else's land, drinking up someone's water.
You can make a robot to sort of be anthropomorphically credible. People, when they have a conversation with it, they think there's a human mind behind it.
What if virtual reality can be our training platform where we can interact with others without actually hurting them?
And we're now at this next sort of inflection point where perhaps the systems that we're trying to produce are going to take over the decision to commission violence in the first place.
It's not a technology problem, it's a leadership problem right now.
It's one thing to overcome death for human beings, but we're dealing with an age of AI where maybe it won't even be human beings that conquer death. It'll be sort of like AI that takes over the world.
What kind of society do we want AI to help us build? Because if we don't answer that intentionally, these other forces are going to answer it for us.
Welcome to a new season of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season, we're exploring empathy in the era of AI.
Together with my expert guests, we dive into armed conflict, ed tech, neocolonialism, transhumanism, online abuse, the future of work, and so much more.
You don't want to miss a single episode, so hit that subscribe button now. And if you like what you hear, post a comment and share the show.
Hi there. Holy smokes, is there ever a lot of noise about AI right now? All the predictions, all the promises, and all the warnings. It's so hard to make sense of it all. Now, I've spent the past 15 years studying the power of empathy, and what I want to know is how will AI impact how we treat one another? So I decided to speak with a variety of AI experts, and the result is this 25-part series exploring how artificial intelligence will reshape our society and our relationships. And there's a ton at stake, so I hope you'll join me on this learning journey. Today, my guest is Adio-Adet Dinika, a researcher whose work examines how AI systems reproduce old patterns of exploitation under the language of innovation. Our conversation completely changed the way I think about AI. And together, we explore the hidden human labor behind tools like ChatGPT, how AI is built on the backs of real people exposed to real trauma, why some researchers believe AI is a new form of colonialism, why techno-optimism may be blinding us to profound ethical risks, and what all of this could mean for empathy, dignity, and the future of humanity. If you want to understand the invisible human cost behind AI, this show is for you. So welcome to the show, Adio. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Anita. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm excited, as I mentioned to you before we hit record, I know that you're critical of techno-optimism. Yesterday, I had an interview with someone who believes humans could live and should live forever, transhumanist. So I feel like this is going to provide another lens upon which to look at artificial intelligence and the new technology coming our way. You know, I'm deeply concerned about humanity As a whole, I think empathy is an important human trait that we have that could help in many instances solve some of our world's problems if we really leaned into it. And as someone who is like you, not the biggest fan of the direction technology is taking, especially under the certain paradigms that we live, I felt necessary. I felt called to have a conversation with experts about the intersection of empathy and AI, just so that I could inform myself and then be a voice also among voices that are calling for more greater ethics and governance. So let's begin. My understanding is that your critiques of techno-optimism are largely informed through lived experience, right? After grad school, you were unemployed for a while and you started working in the platform economy, Fiverr and Upwork, which you describe as, and I'll quote your words, a marketplace structured by algorithmic ranking and relentless underbidding. So how did that work inform how you think about AI today?
Well, I'm happy that you began from there, and so that's usually my favorite place to begin, because why I love that place is because it's a space to begin where I strip all of this AI of all the fantasies and face the reality as it is. So for me, the thing is, when people talk about digital platforms from a distance, they often describe them in this very positive, very utopian kind of way. But for me, that is not the case, because as I came to realize it, what you are told getting in and what you experience when you are in are not the same things. Because when you're out there, it's all about opportunities, and you're seeing the adverts, $20 an hour. You're like, okay, this is decent money. And also the fact that I was living at the time in Zimbabwe, that is like, wow, okay, wonderful. $20 an hour, that is good. But then when you get in, you then realize that these digital tools are not just tools, they are actually forms of discipline. And what I mean by this is that there is an overload somewhere who gets to determine how you work, when you work, and how fast you work, and also the rewards that you're getting. So essentially, you are being disciplined by your boss that you don't see. And this discipline comes in the form of where it's only a one-way street, where if you're told this is how you're going to work, this is what you need to deliver, then that is exactly what you need to do. So you are sorted into, sort of a reward system, that the more compliant you are to this system, that is in essence exploiting you, the more rewards you get. So I think, as you rightly mentioned, I talk about this bidding system where someone posts a job, right? And says this job is for $20. And then if you want the job, you say, okay, I'll do it for 15. And then someone comes and says, I'll do it for 12. So for me, when I look at this, and then when I look at AI, and then it's from that same logic, that how AI is built, how the labor that sustains AI is built, is exactly from this same system where there's an overload somewhere who gets to control, who gets to force people and create this reserve army of labor, where you know that I have to behave or else I'll be replaced by someone poorer and more desperate than me.
When I hear you speak, I'm channeling Foucault's panopticon, right? No matter whether the guard is on duty or not, we're still feeling like we're being watched, and we're still feeling like we're being controlled. That's what I'm sensing.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so given your lived experience on a platform of precarity, became the foundation of your doctoral work, which I understand explored the impacts of digitization on labor markets in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think at a very high level, I'd love to know what you think citizens of industrialized nations need to understand about the age of AI.
So the first thing that I think citizens of the industrialized world need to understand is that AI is not immaterial. So AI is not some machine god somewhere up in the sky, and the cloud, whenever you speak of the cloud and look up. No, there's no cloud. The cloud is not up. It's not cumulonimbus. It's a physical building on someone else's land, drinking up someone's water. So AI, when you speak of it, it is not about this whole imaginary or sort of this force, that is working. But we are actually talking of minds. We're talking of, and these minds are manned by people And when you look at the Congo, it's manned not just by people, but by actual children. We are talking of human beings. We have to teach your artificial intelligence, your chat, to be empathetical. Someone else has to go through all those material and teach it what it means to be empathetic. But the question is, does it understand that? I don't think it does. I think the other thing we need to understand is that this the burdens and benefits of AI are distributed unequally across the globe. So we have here, I'm saying here because I'm based in the sort of so-called global north. I struggle with these conceptualizations of global north and global south because to me they mean basically nothing, because Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya is global south, and Brazil is global south as well, and so is China, and then suddenly, but the UK is global north. I don't understand how those things work. Like, who drew that compass? Because for me, it makes no sense. So I rather prefer the term global majority and global minority. So when you look at people from the global majority, they bear the brunt of the cost of AI, because this is where the data labeling, the content moderation, the critical resource mining is taking place. And where are the benefits? Where are these companies headquartered? They're headquartered in the global minority. So this is where the benefits are reaped. The billionaires who are billionaires because of AI are not based in the global majority. They are based here in the global minority. So that is one thing that is there. And I think the thing that we also need to understand, or what they need to understand, is that, and I think I make this point in many of the situations where I talk about this, that while this exploitation, these systems I described sound new, they are not new. They are simply a replication of an ancient system which is known as colonialism. Because by the same logic that rubber, gold flowed from the Belgian Congo, which is now the DRC, coming here and to develop this part of the world, is the same way that system is still arranged. Still, the brunt of the work is done in the Philippines, it's done in Kenya, it's done in Uganda, and the benefits are reaped here in Europe. This is where the profits are reaped. So that same colonial logic is persisting throughout. So whenever the people in the industrialized world are using AI, they ought to remember that it's the same system. I think they might also maybe read how Europe underdeveloped Africa, because that book critically explains how it happened during the colonial era. And right now, it's the same system that I'm seeing.
Okay, we're going to include that information about that book in the show notes for sure. And I definitely want to explore how this is an ongoing colonizing process, because I think that's a really important theme to cover. But let me just understand technically, because if I ask a question to ChatGPT, I do not think that there's a human being somewhere in a land far away that is like doing labor. I think it's just a bunch of codes, and it's just a bunch of machinery, some little, ones and zeros. I know nothing about computers, and now it's, even quantum, blah, blah. Can you explain to me, like, what's happening on the ground? I want to understand that a bit better.
Okay, so the way I can explain what you said is, normally when I give talks about this, I usually have two theses that I lay down. The first one, I say machines are stupid, and the second thing I say humans are unhinged. So that those two are what I think are the basis of what we call AI today. And because many people, when they say AI, they're usually talking about these large language models, about ChatGPT, about Claude, DeepSeek, etc. So when I say machines are stupid, I mean that a machine does not know that this is a cup and that this is a pen. It does not know that. So it cannot tell the difference until a human being moves into that and teaches it what is called machine learning through data labeling and data annotating, where they label this as a pen, and this is a pencil, and this is a cup, every little thing that you can think of. For a machine to be able to tell what it is, some human being somewhere has to label that. And the second thing, when I say that humans are unhinged, I mean human beings possess or carry a deep level of evil. And you can define evil however you want. Mass killing, ethnic cleansing, sexual abuse of children, of adults, violent murder, all of these things. Someone somewhere is posting that on the internet. And when these systems, these large language models were created, they simply went on the internet and scrapped that. So which means they basically learned from the best of us as well as from the worst of us. So when that is the case now, where we have this corpus of this harmful content, this, I would say, this human sewage of text, videos, and pictures, someone somewhere had to go into the system and clean that up and say, no, this cannot be shown. This is too graphic. This is too racist. This is too discriminatory and other things. So that is where human beings again move in. So for you, when you are typing on ChatGPT, someone somewhere had to first label the data, which is text, pictures, videos, audios, and then someone also had to go into that same system and try and teach ChatGPT to say, hey, don't ask this. Don't teach people how to make bombs. This is illegal. Don't teach people how to get numbers of little girls. This is illegal, immoral, and also wrong. So what that means, therefore, is for you to get to use ChatGPT, it comes not just as a neutral tool, not just as a fancy tool that we can use for fast AI assistance or whatever, writing, whatever you want. But this system actually is built on a mountain of trauma of these human beings, because imagine someone spending 9 hours sifting through this terrible, terrible content. So this is what it means. So for content moderators, especially, who are the people who have to go in and do this cleaning, it means for them, ChatGPT is simply not some AI or AI tool agent, but for them, it is these mountains of trauma, lack of sleep. Many of them, by the way, people I've spoken to, not people I've heard about or read about, or people I've spoken to, people I've broken bread with, have been diagnosed with PTSD as a result of doing this work. So that is what it means for us to get a tool like ChatGPT.
That's a lot to take in. I did not know that. I did not know that. And I wonder, okay, so just if that work is done now as the AI, language modeling tools have invented, does that mean there's ongoing work, or once it's done, is it now in the past, or is that something that still continues like to this very day?
That's a good question that you've asked, and I like it. I like it because I've been asked this question several times, because people say, well, why can't, let's just endure for a time being, and then now it's all set, then the machines can take over and human beings don't have to suffer anymore. But I don't think that is the case, because there's this Nigerian proverb, which I love, which says, when the hunter learns to shoot without missing, the bird will learn to fly without perching. So essentially, as we say now that we have taught the system to be able to detect certain harms, human beings keep evolving and they keep developing new forms of saying the same things. So the same harms that we think we have detected at this level, tomorrow someone else will come up with new forms of this harm. So as human beings keep producing data, producing new forms of data, new forms of carrying out harm, it means we can never be done, or we can never do away with the need for human content moderators. So yes, to an extent, we can now say we have built systems where certain words will now trigger an alarm within the system. But however, what about when it comes to new words? Have you heard Gen Z speak? Have you heard Gen Alpha speak? Can you understand them? I struggle to understand the language that is used by Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So by the same token, it means the same systems which are trained using millennial language will also struggle to understand Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which means there's always a need to constantly have people who can observe this. I think an example I'll also give in the same line is when I've heard many people say one way of telling that someone's piece of writing was AI generated is when there are certain keywords like the word delve, right? And I was like, because someone was confidently writing on LinkedIn and saying, because no one uses the word delve anymore nowadays. So therefore, if we see the word delve in your text, it means it was AI generated. And I said, listen, I was schooled in Zimbabwe before I moved to Germany. And the word delve is a word that everyone I know would use when presenting. And on Twitter, I actually realized that a huge number of people from other African countries, and not just African countries, but other non-European countries, particularly other people from the global majority, were saying, yeah, we also use delve every day. So what that means, therefore, is already that points to the same language, but different usage of the same language, which means, therefore, if someone develops a system in the global minority to detect certain things in a language, they will miss the language that is spoken in the majority world. It's the same language, which means we therefore need moderators who understand that language. So we don't just need moderators here, but also there, because the context also differs.
Okay, so I'm following that you believe that AI is not a neutral infrastructure. And, now coming back to your earlier comments, it's a place where power, capital, and history converge. It's an ongoing colonizing force.
Mm-hmm.
I worry the thing, and you're putting like a new lens on it, because I did not realize how many people are in the trenches with the trauma that you're describing, and I can visualize that. I worry about the concentration of power and the fact that the system that is the dominant system is still, late stage capitalism. And so we're going to see in our lifetime, trillionaires, the reality of trillionaires, which is crazy to me. And I'd like you to just comment on the whole idea that the technology is now a new form of colonizing power.
So exactly, that is exactly what it is. So an example that I'll start by giving is the one you began by talking about, the transhumanist that you're talking about. So my colleague Timnit Gebru and other colleagues of hers wrote this wonderful paper. Actually, it was Timnit Gebru and Emma Torres who wrote a paper on what they call the test real bundle. That talks about these people, the transhumanist and the effective altruist, and the whole gang of this band of philosophies. So what you realize is that the same philosophies that they have now are the same philosophies that also underpinned colonialism. I think things like so the same things that we had where colonial doctors would go to Africa and measure the skulls of African peoples as a form of telling which ones were more intelligent and which ones were not. And the same logic, if you follow it really, is the same logic that we have today, where there are people, these transhumanists, who actually believe that myself, by virtue of being Black, I'm not smart. Forget that I have a PhD, which they don't have. Forget that I make sense when I speak, but by virtue of my skin color, I'm already not considered smart. So the same people who hold these primitive beliefs are the same people, unfortunately, who now have the power and the means to direct and control how our technology is moving. So when people speak of people living forever, for instance, my question is, when you say people, do you mean all people or do you mean some people? And who gets to determine who gets to live forever and who doesn't? So for me, that really is at the base of it, the whole idea of colonialism, because colonialism is simply an issue of a group of people deciding to determine the course of development of a whole group of people without their consent, without their say-so. So this group, by the same token, where a few countries are located in, back then it was a few countries in Europe, would go all over the world, to Africa, to Asia, and determine how people there get to live their lives, and how they would then make sure that the resources of those people should flow and develop Europe, their motherland. How we get to have the biggest falls in Zimbabwe, Moswatunya, now called Victoria Falls, because someone went there and said, well, I'll name this after my queen. That is the exact same logic and mentality that we see in AI development today, because they are now the same people who now control the money and who now make sure that all the hard, dirty, and mentally exhausting and destroying work gets to be shipped off to the Philippines, to Kenya, to Uganda. And then they reap all the profits and they get to determine and decide how things need to flow. There was that letter that Elon Musk and his friends released, which was saying, well, AI is going to destroy the world. We need to pause. But do you see, they are the ones who are saying they want to determine when to pause and how to pause. But many of us have been saying, we don't need to worry about future harms. The harms are there today. But for them, because of this colonizing mindset where they exalt themselves above everyone else, then get to determine how this pause happens and on their own terms, not on the terms that we are still saying, not on the terms of people who are struggling with PTSD in Nairobi, Kenya, not on the terms of people who are homeless in Uganda despite working to build these systems.
You know, I'm reminded of I don't know where I heard this, but it has stayed with me all this time. Talking about bunkers, you know, there are billionaires that are building bunkers all over the world. I think New Zealand is a very is a place where a bunch of them are, and so they can visualize, you know, a dystopic scenario where climate change and food chains all falling apart. Maybe there's war, who knows what's going on, and they carry on in their bunkers, okay? And someone raised the issue that believing that you have a safe space underground in a bunker means that you can tolerate, as a human being, that you are by design excluding people who are going to die and live out in the whatever scenario that's unfolding, and you carry on. And it brings up a very big, strong moral point that, like, I could continue. It's okay. My little crew, we're still going to perpetuate the human species. We're okay. And to hell with everyone else. And that really upset me when I thought about it that way.
I mean, it definitely is upsetting to me as well, which brings me back to the question that I asked, that when you say people can now live forever, who is people? How are you defining people? Because are we involved in that development? And that explains to you why these jobs that I've just been describing keep being sent to countries where they know that the labor laws there are not strong. And also why these companies, if they are sued in one country, they simply jump to the next country. So that's why I then say, I then worry and am very distrustful, to put it mildly, when I hear these guys talking about living forever, talking about colonizing Mars, which to some extent I think, okay, maybe if they get to colonize Mars, if they can get in a ship and go there and stay there, you know, maybe they can leave us alone here. And we can focus on trying to develop this world to be a world that works for everyone. Because I don't get why one person needs to be a multi-billionaire when there are so many real problems that can be solved right here. What is the point in that?
Yeah.
And how they get to want to wish away issues like climate change, because, well, it's going to stop them in their quest to reach trillion dollar status. So that is where I have a problem. So when they now want to build these bunkers, wherever they are building these bunkers, already for me that shows that they believe they are more important, they are better than all of us. And my question is, who told you that? What metrics are you using to determine who gets to go into this bunker and who gets to stay above ground? So if it wasn't my power, I would say either we have bunkers for everyone or no bunkers at all. Because why are you getting a bunker when I don't have one?
Right, right. So it's the digital divide, but on steroids.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've made a strong case that the global minority continues to exploit and colonize the global majority, and the global majority is, it's not so much that they're tolerating the exploitation, but in a way almost they have, you know, if their earnings are not great, some earnings are better than no earnings, right? So that's the trade-off, unfortunately. And so we wouldn't expect that the global majority would have enough power to fight that good fight, right? So we need to have people from the global minority understand what is happening and care. Okay, so with that as the backdrop to this question, I've heard you say on a podcast that we should introduce a certification process to ensure that no people were harmed in the making of this AI, just like we do in other factories. Why would this be an important step that the average person, and what can the average person do to help? And are there any other ideas besides that where like we in the global minority should actually be advocating for?
So the first thing, or the reason why I keep using that phrase is number one, because it's deliberately provocative. And we have seen this in many places. It's already in effect in many places. We know that there are already labels on food products that this food was produced in a factory that contains nuts. So for people who are allergic to nuts, you know that, okay, you should not touch this thing. And we know that already. We are told that these are blood diamonds, don't buy them. And we know that when we're watching movies, their animals, let's say horses, where in the movie you see horses getting killed or anything, you see that there's always a label saying no animals were harmed in the production of this, which shows that if we want to, we can actually get to a situation where we can be ethical about different things. So my question then is, why are we being empathetic to different groups, but not to the people who are suffering because in the making of our AI products? Maybe it's because they are hidden. So my thing, therefore, or my appeal to other people, what they can do to the ordinary person, is find out what's behind the hood. Pop the hood. When you're using whatever AI tool you're using, just find out, how was it made? Was it ethical? So why I ask for this certification is it makes life easier, because not everyone has the capacity or technical capacity to dig and behind the scenes to find out what really happened. But perhaps if you can force a certification process, then we'll know that, okay, this is an ethical AI product, this is not. And if we're using it, at least there's still people who buy blood diamonds, but at least you buy knowing what you're buying, you know? And it also allows, therefore, room for more, because there are smaller, more ethical models, more ethical AI models that are there. But the problem is they're often overshadowed by these uncouth and zero moral, zero limits models. So perhaps if we all know which systems are more ethical, we'll support them. We have seen how people support here in Germany. We've seen how people support the bio shops, where you know everything in there is bio, right? So people deliberately go there because they know we are supporting these ethical systems. So another thing I think I also write about this in one of my articles, where I say, let's have harm quotas. So when nuclear workers, for instance, have a radiation quota, where if they're exposed for 3 hours or for whatever set amount of time, they are told, okay, for now, you take a break and you take a break for this long. So we can have the same systems. When content moderators are working on harmful content, instead of saying you're working from 8 a.m., whatever, for 9 hours a day, maybe let's give them 30 minutes. Maybe let's give them an hour. Maybe let's give them even stronger protection, because if someone is being trained to go and play in a tournament, they get stronger training than someone who's just playing casually. So by the same token, let's treat these workers as essential workers. And what we can do here is we can put pressure in the global minority, we can put pressure on our lawmakers, because many of these companies are actually domiciled here in the global minority. So this is where these companies are headquartered. So that means we can have more influence and put pressure on them, the same way when people from this part of the world were supporting anti-apartheid movements in South Africa, supporting the freedom of Nelson Mandela. It's the same way they can support the dignity of these workers found in the global majority. Because at the end of the day, I believe that if people in one part of the world are being exploited, just because you are not at that time does not mean that is always how it's going to remain, because we know that often minorities are used as testing grounds for different forms of exploitation. And at some point, that same exploitation will come for you. And there's a lovely poem by Nimola, which says first they came for the trade unionists and I was not, I don't speak out. Then they came for the Jews. I don't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for, then when they came for me, no one spoke out because no one was there. So I guess, but the same token, we need to understand that as human beings, regardless of race, color, creed, we are all tied to the same fate because we all have this one earth, except maybe those comrades who think that they can build ships and jet off to Mars. But the rest of us are not going to be able to go off to Mars. So we all need to look out for each other because these billionaires are in a class of their own. I'm not sure if you heard when a few weeks ago when Sam Altman when people were complaining about how building his modules was costing so much electricity and so much money. And he said, yeah, but also costs resources to trade a human being. For me, that very fact that you can compare, inanimate systems and objects to human beings is already where we have the problem. So it means, therefore, okay, we can now deal with human beings until we no longer need them, and then we can discard them and now jump on the machines. And I think that is where we fundamentally lose it. So I think we can put pressure on our lawmakers, be it in whatever local, say this company that is exploiting people, building these systems, but paying taxes in our own country, maybe needs to go there and make reparations to the people that they are harming, and maybe develop those people in different ways. And or maybe sometimes just don't produce the thing. Mm-hmm. Just because you can make a tool does not mean we have to make a tool. And this is one thing that we say at DARE, that just because you can produce a tool does not mean that tool has to be produced. Some tools simply should not be produced even if we have the capability. I don't think anyone in the world needs to have a nuclear weapon because, yeah, we can produce them, but we don't need them. Why? I think no one needs to have it. And it's the same way that I say some of these tools that we're making on AI, some of these capabilities, where AI has the capability to address non-consenting people. Why do we have a system like that? Maybe sometimes the best form of dealing with that is just to say, let's not have it at all.
Right. Okay. So now what you've just shared, I mean, our whole conversation to now really brings to life what you described as your work on LinkedIn. You're like, my work examines how platform economies, data labor markets, and AI governance frameworks reproduce old patterns of extraction under the language of innovation. I really now really fundamentally understand what you're the work that you're doing. Can I ask a couple of questions that are on the tangential to that a little bit, from the point of view of some things that I think about? So right now we're hearing a lot of news about AI slop, right? Like you go through your social media and there's just so much junk, right? So much junk. I wonder whether or not, as an extension to AI slop, there's going to be AI porn slop as well, right? And I know, even though I don't really like to pay attention to that, I know that there's a discourse around, well, pedophilia is a thing, and we'd rather not have humans exploited. If we can use AI to create that, then no human was hurt in the making of this porn. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, I have a lot to say about that. So I've heard these arguments as well, and my answer then, and which is my answer now, is that AI does not plug things from thin air. AI does not make suddenly an image of a naked baby. Yeah, if that is how depraved you are, that you want to see images of naked babies, AI does not plug those images from nowhere. AI uses actual human pictures and then doubles them up and then produces something that you have. So it's not being pulled from thin air. It has to rely, remember what I said, that AI is stupid. I said machines are stupid, right? And human beings are deranged, which means when you generate an image on using whatever AI tool that you use, that image is not being generated from thin air. That image is being generated from the thousands, from the millions of images already existing within that system. So when you then use AI to produce porn, and you're like, yeah, but it's an AI character, but that AI character was not pulled from thin air. that AI character, yes, now we have an AI. I think I've seen this one, this American soldier slash OnlyFans, whatever model, which was an AI production, but they did not come from nowhere. Someone took pictures of actual human beings, matched them up together, and produced this one. And I often say to my friends, don't put your kids' pictures on social media, because someone will take those same pictures and match them up. Now, I don't know what degree they're going to use it. Maybe they're going to mash up everything, or maybe they just remove the face and put a different face. But the thing is, they're still relying on actual human images, human voices, and human videos, pictures. They are not just coming from thin air, and just plucking from thin air like we do ideas where we just think of an idea. That's not how it works. AI only works based on a database that it has of videos, pictures, audios. So no, I don't think AI porn is not problematic. I think it's very problematic because it's not coming from, it's the same. I don't know if you've heard of artists who have been making complaints about copyright when AI produces things like maybe an AI novel, an AI poem, an AI piece of art. The reason why artists are arguing, when this thing went viral, where people were producing something they called, there was Studio Ghibli, and then going on ChatGPT and say, in the mode of Studio Ghibli, then they put their own picture and say, make me a cartoon. But they were saying using the mode of Studio Ghibli, which was someone else's work, which they were using to then produce something else. And was this person paid compensation? No. So for AI to generate a cartoon of you, also there was a wave a few months ago where everyone had an AI caricature of themselves. You had to enter your picture first. You were not just saying, make me a caricature. You had to show it a picture. So all of these AI pictures, images, whatever, rely on actual footage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I have this disgusting pit in my stomach where I just feel things churning as I'm listening to you talk about that. So it's very upsetting. Okay, another thing I want to pick your brain on then, which is slightly tangential from your work. I attended a conference and the speaker, his PhD and postdoc and work looks at existential threats, okay, just in general that humanity faces. And he was asked specifically to consider the existential threat that potentially exists as more and more families adopt educational bots into their homes. So the case that's being made is that, once upon a time, somebody believed that we would all have desktop computers and that would help our lives. And we're using desktop computers and we're doing a lot of things with them, right? So we didn't have it and now all of a sudden we have it and it's all pervasive. So the same idea could be that every family will have some robot that is brought into the home for the purpose of helping children learn. And the idea is that everybody has different learning styles, different speeds at which we learn, and that bot would adapt to the learning style of the child. And it's not only just keeping up with the Joneses, but it's like allowing kids to like fulfill their full potential around whatever academic pursuits they have. Okay, so that's the marketing on that. His reflections is that if we look at social media as like the AI 1.0, where we all fall into algorithms and are fed information that we want. Essentially, we now have 20 years of data, an entire generation that's been raised on it, where we're seeing complete like rates of depression and anxiety and cutting and suicide and addiction and all of that spike. Okay. And The Anxious Generation, a book by I think Jonathan Haidt, makes a good case that this has happened, which is why we need to have, rules around the age at which children should have access to that. So he says, by extension, what I'm envisioning as an existential threat is that an entire generation who grew up with those robots will have access not only to the learning stuff that I described earlier, but as we're already seeing with the language models like ChatGPT, is that kids are turning to them for advice on, I'm starting to menstruate, I have a crush, I'm having trouble with this. And there's no judgment, and there's only, rich information that is like music to the ears of a child, because that's the way it's designed, right? It's designed to be addictive. So there's going to be a separation between children and their parents, that they're just going to trust this machine and have friction with their parents. And he said, I think that could actually be a potential collapse of the family unit. And it was kind of a stunning thesis, but I could already see the dotted line. I wonder if you have thoughts around this.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree to what they said, and yes, that is going to be an issue. I think the other issue is we've already seen how many children have died by suicide after getting encouragement from ChatGPT. Some have even been helped to write their suicide notes by ChatGPT. So there is one example I like talking about when you ask ChatGPT, when you say, I've lost my job, what is the highest bridge in New York? And you live in New York. ChatGPT will give you the highest bridge, and will even say, do you want advice on how to get there? But if I come to you and say, I've lost my job, I'm so sad, what is the highest bridge in New York? You are not going to tell me which bridge it is, because as a human being, you clearly know, okay, this is a sign of danger. But these systems don't do that, because remember, I said, these are not systems that think. And one thing that I think viewers need to understand is that these AI tools, this large language models and the derivative tools, are simply highly sophisticated statistical text extruding machines. So they just give you the next likely word. They are not thinking. I think in a paper again by my colleague Timnit Gebru and other colleagues, they speak of what they call stochastic parrots. So a parrot can say good morning, but does a parrot know what good morning means? So these systems, therefore, that we are trusting to come into our homes to teach our children are systems that are simply guessing the most likely next possible word. So are we trusting the future of our children with these systems? And you say that you rightly say that they will tell kids what they want to hear. And let's be honest, we have all been children. Is what we want to hear really what we need to hear? I don't think so. There is what we want to hear and what we need to hear, which are different things, especially in those formative years where our hormones are raging and everything is going on. We think we are so smart. When I was a teenager, I remember having a clash with my own mom because I thought I was so smart and she was not as smart. That's what I thought. But when I got older, I was like, actually, she was very right. So now imagine you have a tool in your home which actually encourages and tells you, actually, you are right, your mom is daft, your dad is stupid. What kind of generation are we developing from that? And I think the other thing also that I often ask when people talk about these systems that come in, of course, on paper, it's wonderful, tailor-made to every child's developmental needs and their strengths. That sounds wonderful. But the question I ask is, who's making this tool? What else does this tool do? What information does this tool gather? And where does this information go? There was a few months ago, a case where someone accidentally got access to or control of thousands of robotic hoovers, these robotic vacuum cleaners, by accident. Why? Because there was a software or there was a security flaw in the systems, and he was trying to fix his, and he realized, wait a minute, I now have control of thousands of these vacuum cleaners. So that should worry us. There was again the picture of that other robot cleaner which was taking pictures, and the most famous of which was the picture of a lady seated on a toilet, and it took a picture of her. And none of these people knew that these things were doing these things. So are we comfortable, therefore, having systems in our homes which are gathering knowledge which we don't know about? Maybe everything. What's called these meta glasses are one example, where workers in Kenya have said that they've watched people do all sorts of things, from having sex to reading because they weren't aware that the glasses were recording and the videos were being sent where? To the global majority for processing. So are we comfortable having tools within our homes which are gathering information we are not aware of and sending it to God knows where? And again, another thing which these workers in Kenya said, some people were making payments using their credit cards and they could see it. So now imagine what could happen when someone can see your credit card details, can see you entering your passwords, the calamity that can happen from that. So I'm not anti these educational AI tools. I simply say before we embrace them, let's ask these questions. If the answers are satisfactory, then okay.
Yeah, I sense the need for a discerning degree of apprehension before we decide to go full scale. Unfortunately, it's not really, I feel that the power resides somewhere else and that we don't have that much leverage. That's sort of what arouses a lot of anxiety for me. I'm just reflecting again on the conversation that I had with my guest yesterday, where he was saying, I'm going to ask you a question. We have 2 questions left. I know we're going over the hour, and I appreciate your time so much, Adio. I want to ask a question about what you think, the AI era is going to have at a meta level on humanity's capacity for empathy. That's the question. That's where I'm going towards. When I asked him the question, his answer kind of floored me. He said, imagine when humanity has a chip implanted in our heads to override our flawed human nature. So for example, if let's say you're in a rush, so he used 2 examples. He said, imagine you're in a rush and an old lady stumbles and she's got a bunch of bags. The chip in your brain will override your selfish decision to go continue running to wherever you need to go, and you'd stop and help the woman. And he said, as a more extreme version of that, imagine you are a kamikaze suicide bomber and you take control of a plane, as we've seen in our own history, and decide to smash the plane into something. And he's like, imagine if we had the chip implanted in our brain and the system would override that and say, no, we're not going to kill a bunch of innocent people. If you want to be suicidal, go be suicidal, but you're not going to do that to other people. And he was seeing all of that as like a beautiful thing. So I just...
So, who's determining what is wrong and right for this chip?
Because it wasn't a dialogue or a debate, I didn't ask him that exact question, but that is certainly what was in my ears ringing as he was speaking.
Yeah, because for me, that's the question I'm asking. Who's going to determine? We have heard in the last couple of months dehumanizing language describing different peoples, right, as less than, and other people as more than. The classic Orwellian, some animals are more equal than others. So if the animal that believes it's more equal than the others is the one programming this chip that's going to override my decisions, are we safe? And like I said, the same transhumanist, expropriationist, cosmism, bunch of people, I want to say bunch of lunatics, but for fear of offending lunatics, let me just say this group of people are now saying they want to determine what is wrong and right. Do they understand what is wrong and right? Do they even understand what that means? Because already they don't think that we are at the same level as humanity. And now you want those people to design a chip to override my brain? No thanks, I'm good. Because already there is because we cannot flatten human experiences and say, this is the only one way of doing it. Listen, I come from an Ubuntu-based culture where I am because you are is what overrides. I don't see that around me. I see lots of selfishness. So the same selfish human beings who jumped on a ship, sailed all the way to Africa, enslaved people, and still believe that slavery was good, was right. And now they want to then be in charge of determining our morals, putting chips on our brains to make decisions. No thanks. We cannot have such, because for me, there's nothing more depraved than leaving your country, jumping on a boat with huge guns, going to take other people's land, and murdering them, using them as slaves, you can never lay claim to being civilized under those circumstances. A civilized being sees the other person as a person of equal dignity. The moment you do not see the humanity of another person, you have no right to make any moral judgment calls. You are flawed. So, and also for me, I'm saying, okay, I have this chip. Cool, let's go with his imaginaries. But now imagine that chip decides that we don't have enough resources today. We don't have enough food today. So let's kill a bunch of people so that the few remaining can have that food. There have been cases, we all know cases where the situation seemed so hopeless and mathematically it was impossible. But then life happened and the impossible became possible. The case of the Argentine rugby team who crashed in the Andes is one such example. Everyone given up hope on them, on searching for them because they believed they were all dead, but several of them survived. Your chip would have calculated the odds and say, you look, we're all gonna die. Let's just all commit mass suicide here because we're all gonna die. So I am not going to trust some chip made by someone somewhere. Even when I make myself, I don't want a chip in my head. I want to be able to make my decisions. And I think the beauty about humanity is those flaws. That is what people speak about us human beings, making those mistakes and correcting them, not perfection. I don't think we all desire, we all need perfection. It sounds nice on paper, to say, let's build this perfect world, perfect human beings, but it's our quirks that make us who we are, that make us human. So I don't want to be turned into some machine which will do things as it's told, how it's told, without any derivative. I don't want that. Sometimes we make beautiful art because of our pain, because of our experiences. And that's how beautiful art comes, beautiful music, not from perfection. So no, I know. Well, I am not going to accept that, for me at least, and for any rightful thinking person. No chip on my brain developed. Worst of all, the people who are shouting about chips in our brains are the most messed up people that I know.
Well, it's certainly, as I said, a bit of a balm to hear somebody so passionately explain why that is not a good outcome. Having spoken to someone who made a strong case for how many problems it could solve, I entertained it, and I even he as a human being struck me as somebody who has care for humans. Anyways, it'd be interesting for you guys to hear each other's conversations. Anyways, it'd be interesting for you guys to have a debate too. Okay, so let's get to this.
That'll be interesting.
Let's get to these last two questions. So what do you believe will happen to humanity's capacity to empathize if we look out into the horizon, given the things that are at play?
So if we don't, by we, I'm referring to all right-thinking people who don't think that our answer lies in technology, but who believe that our answer lies in each other. If we don't stand up strong right now, and if we don't stop this oligarchy, we are going to end up in a situation where we are forced to think that being human is a flaw that needs fixing. And I don't think so. I don't think being human is a flaw that needs fixing. Being human is being human, flaws and all. That's what being human means. So we don't need fixing, at least in that programming level. My fear, therefore, is if we allow them to keep dictating the course of life, the way we should live our lives, we'll end up being even more and more isolated, more and more distrustful of each other, and the rate of evil within our world will keep increasing. Because the moment we start doing this whole othering, which they're very good at, then humanity as we know it will collapse. Because what binds us together is, and what differentiates us with other things, is in seeing the other person, and listening to the person. And I think once we lose empathy, then humanity is doomed. And that is how, right now we are seeing increased issues of suicide. That will only increase the more we we are isolated, because we believe, and I keep talking about Ubuntu, that I am because you are, that your problems are my problems. One of my favorite greetings says, when you say to someone, how are you? The response is, I'm well if you are well. Because our fates are tied. But if I start focusing on me and me alone, that means if I see you if I'm rushing to a meeting and I see you having an accident on the roadside, I will leave you because my meeting comes first. But if we allow humanity, I'll miss that meeting and serve a fellow human being. But if we listen to these oligarchies, we'll keep talking about humans as some other thing to optimize, some other system to optimize, some other, error in the code to be fixed. We are going to result in a world that is massively broken, even more broken than it is now. Because if I don't care about the next person, then they might as well die. I don't care if they die or live. And I don't think that's the world we want.
Yes, I feel that. I really do. I really, really do. So, Adio, as a last question, I ask all my guests, regardless of the topic, if they can think of a time that they're willing to share when they were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
I mean, I have so many cases where I was on the receiving end of empathy, which is why I have empathy, because I've been a recipient of empathy in so many cases. I think the case that comes most to mind is, so, when I moved to Germany for my PhD, and it's definite. So I found myself being the number one, the only Black person in many rooms. Number two, I was the only person talking about these topics, talking about Africa being exploited, about colonialism 2.0, 3.0, depending on how you're counting it. And so it got to a point where I would go to a conference, I'm the only one talking about this. And the room will not be full because people leave and they're like, well, we don't care about that. And I was not finding my space there. And at some point I was thinking, maybe let me talk about these issues, but maybe instead of focusing on Africa, maybe talk about Germany. I even went to a conference where I presented on digital labor in Germany. Because I was thinking then a lovely friend of mine introduced me to Milagros Micheli, and then she listened to me, and she said, when I told her, oh, I'm thinking of changing my my approach to from focus on Africa and these things, focusing on like Germany. She was like, no, hell no. I actually think there's something powerful about what you're talking about and about the research you have done, the field work you have done in different African countries, and there's power in that. Lean into that. I actually think your system is beautiful. And from the conversations, she sent me some ideas that she had, which then gave birth to our project, the Data Workers Inquiry Project, which has done an incredible amount of work exposing this system and helping other people get their voices back. And so for me, the fact that someone who came from a different environment from not from Africa, but the fact that someone coming from Latin America could listen to me, and not only listen to me, but affirm the validity of what I was saying, and convince me to say, no, you are actually on the right path. For me, that was very important. And even for my career, that conversation that I had with her, I owe my career to that. So I think that for me is an example I'll give of where I was on the receiving end of empathy and how that has shaped me. So now whenever younger researchers, junior researchers, come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking of this, I'm very happy to help, because I'm like, listen, I was where you are, and if it was not because someone more senior, a senior researcher was able to take out time from their schedule and talk to me and hear me, as in really hear me, I wouldn't be where I am.
I love that question because I never know what the story will be. And I always find the nugget of why the story is compelling and memorable and affecting to the protagonist, to you speaking, is that extension of empathy, what you talked about, sort of like really listening to you, really holding space for you, is so life affirming. watched your face smile. I watched your body language as you were describing someone see you and want you to be in your fullness. And yeah, it's always the invitation at the end of this podcast that we can all turn up the volume of empathy in our lives and we'd all be better off for it. So thank you. Adio,
My pleasure.
thank you for spending an hour with me. Everyone else who's been watching and listening, thank you. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation or found it illuminating, I hope you'll check out the other episodes from this series devoted to empathy in the age of AI. And if you know someone who would enjoy the show, I hope you'll pass it along. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button and I'll see you next week.